Welcome to the Hunter Livestock Forum 2020. Following the success of the Livestock Forum at the Singleton Showground in 2018, we wanted to continue the program. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has changed all that, so we've moved to a new format. Welcome to the brave new world. I'm Tony Hegarty, I'm Chair of Hunter Local Land Services. I am a partner in a family farm at Cassilis, which is the western end, up at the western end of the Hunter Valley. Along with my family, we run beef cattle and sheep enterprises. I also am President of the Cattle Council of Australia and a Director of National Farmers Federation. Our staff at LLS over the last few years dealing with drought have come across regularly issues with farmers suffering from decision paralysis, unable to move forward and make decisions. And while under normal circumstances they would be able to do this fine, it's when they're dealing with a disruptive impact, a drought, a flood, a fire, all these things I refer to as disruptive impacts. And it's that inability to make decisions that suggested to us that this is what we should be doing for today. So we don't know when the next disruptive impact is. We've had some nice rain through the Hunter, but there are areas of the state that are still in dry time, so when will the next one happen to us, whether it be fire, flood or drought, as I was talking about earlier. So making decisions is, we're not always going to make the right decisions. You only make the decision that's available at the time with the knowledge you've got. But making no decision has proven to be the wrong decision. When we were meeting to work on this webinar, we noted that there was not, people don't get taught how to make decisions. And from my memory, the only time I've ever been taught how to make decisions was in a workshop that run in the Animal Savoury Institute, where they had a module on decision making. What I'm going to do now is sort of work through some of my own personal reflections, and they are personal, but it's one of those things that we need to work on about when it comes to decision making, because when you're under the pump during a fire, a flood or a drought, you actually need to have prepared yourself for it. So planning for decision making starts with planning. So planning on the property, planning for your livestock, and planning so that you can make the decisions when they happen. So when you're developing these plans, don't just store them in your head. They need to be shared, they need to be available. Other people having a look at them will give you a better perspective. It's a bit like sport. When you practice or train with sport, you actually are building your ability to, when you get on the court or the field, to react and do what you've trained or practiced. And there's no difference in your own business. A drought plan is also a flood plan, is also a fire plan, particularly when it comes to recovery. Apart from the loss of livestock or infrastructure, dealing with those disruptive impacts have a lot of similarities underneath them. Recovery in particular from all of those disruptive impacts is similar. And destocking or feeding are similar in drought, fire recovery, flood recovery, or in my case, it was a bore dries up situation. So we had in our business, we had leased land. We had we were gradually destocking. This was in late 2006 because of dry season that we were in, and we lost all the water off the place, the bore, the creeks, the dams, all gone. So what that was our drought plan was in process. It just was shortened down from a monthly or 6-monthly plan to a 3-day plan. But it was the same thing, and it enabled me to react and do what needed to be done. My point here is that planning for a disruptive impact has a universal base. By doing the plan for one, we may be able to use or adapt our plan to many of these impacts. Planning should be counter-cyclical. You plan for a drought when you're in a good season, and when you're in a drought, you plan for recovery. So at the moment, we've just come out of a drought. We've gone through this good rainfall period in February, March, And we've hopefully built ourselves a good base of feed, and we've got livestock back on the business. It's now time to reflect what we've done during that drought period, when we've actually got the ability to do it without being saddled with the drought on us, and learn from those experiences. In some of our emergency situations, one of the things that's been picked up from other agencies is that if you don't review the problems that occurred in the emergency, and in this case I'm referring to drought, and if you don't implement the changes that need to be made, when it comes to the next time, you make the same mistakes. And so on our farms, as you come out of the drought and you're into a situation, don't sit back and relax too much. What we need to do is actually plan for the next drought or the next disruptive impact. As a producer and land livestock manager and business manager, we need to have a balanced approach. And by balanced, I mean when we're making decisions, we need to take in what I see as 4 very important parts of the decision we're making. And they are the people, finance, animals and animal welfare, and the landscape. People, this is the first and the most important. It's about us. That's the whole point we're in the business. That's the whole point we're on the farm doing it, because this is where we want to be, sure, but we owe ourselves and we need to look after ourselves. If we are not in a good space, health-wise, it will hamper our ability to do things on the farm and to do things in the decision-making process. And this may be what we've been seeing, is that people get burdened with everything and it actually becomes a health problem. So there are other issues that need to be dealt there. But part of those all come together. The other 3 of them all come together and are all interrelated. The finance, you need to understand your business. You need to know your costs for production. Where your income and your profitability is coming from. We want to be able to compare it with market opportunities. Separate overheads from variable costs. The more knowledge we build around this space means that when we come to making those decisions, we will be able to use the knowledge we've got there and build up on. The animals and animal welfare. In a livestock business, this is the core to our income and profitability. Balancing the stock numbers to the carrying capacity is the baseline in this discussion. It is not, if the feed is not on the landscape, then where is the feed coming from? At what cost? These are all the things we need to consider, and alternatives. Destocking, feeding, adjustment, selling the animals and retaining the genetics. In the last 5 years, I know of one significant cattle herd that had what was considered to be very good genetics. And their way of dealing with the drought was to sell all the females, but have the first option to buy back the genetics, the next generation. And I just thought, what a great way of dealing with the situation. And so that's an alternative that people need to look at and think about. One of the best animal welfare tools that we have available to us in Australia at the moment is the quality of our livestock transport. To be able to move animals from a dry area to an area with feed is just of great benefit, and we can do it, and we can do it over significant distances quite well in Australia at the moment. So I think that's a benefit that our industry has now that we probably didn't have 20, 30, 50 years ago. The other part is the landscape. Ground cover and pasture health are critical in both good and tight seasons. How we look after our ground cover and soils in a drought will impact on the recovery time and the ability of the landscape to provide for our business. Now, with fire and flood, it's a different game. Fire does a huge amount of environmental damage, but you've got to work out how you're going to recover from that. In drought, by destocking, we've been able to actually a look after our land, and the recovery time after the rainfall events has been far quicker than I've been able to react to with restocking. So, you know, if you look after the soil and the pastures will come back and help you. Those of us who have had good rain in that February-March period will have seen varying responses even within our own farm. The areas that we've been harder on, they'll be still a bit behind. The areas that we were able to look after, they'll have moved away very quickly, as it was summer rain, warm period. So, Simon, that's sort of a brief round of introductions of my thoughts on where we're going and how we tie all those things together into the decision making. But if I go back to where I was before, where I started, you need to plan for decisions, and it starts with planning.